Hi, everybody. Today is Saturday, July 4th, 2026, and our dear friend, Professor Marandi, is here with us. Welcome back, Professor. Let me start with what has happened yesterday, which is so important. I want to talk about the countries who participated so far in the funeral of the Supreme Leader of Iran. But before going there, there was a breaking news yesterday, which was about Yemen. An Iranian civilian jet breached 10-year siege on Yemen. We had the blockade on Yemen, US Saudi blockade on Yemen for more than 10 years. And you see the Iranian airplane goes there and we had this Saudi Arabia, the fighter jets of Saudi Arabia trying to, make some sort of troubles, but it seems that they were forced out of the airspace of Yemen by the air defense system of Yemen. What was the importance of that? What was the main reason for Iranian airplane going there?
Well, we have to keep in mind that Yemen was, the genocide in Yemen began before Gaza. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. The genocide in Yemen began before the genocide in Gaza. And the Americans and the Saudis and the Emiratis and all the countries in the region assisted the Saudis and the Emiratis to carry out the genocide. When in 2015, Obama gave the green light to begin the genocide, Erdogan and Turkey and Qatar, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, all of them were allied. Egypt, Jordan, all of them went and worked along with the West. I met an American who, a former American official, who told me that he was on a ship, a U.S. naval ship in the Red Sea during the siege on Yemen, during the genocidal war there. And the ship that he was on captured a small boat that was carrying medicine to Yemen. And the sailors, the U.S. sailors, went and dumped all of the medicine into the sea. So Yemen was dealing with this coalition of monsters, and they were surrounded, but they defeated them. And of course, Turkey and Qatar. I shouldn't say Turkey, Erdogan, because Erdogan is not Turkey. Erdogan and Qatar, they supported the genocide. But then when the Saudis and Emiratis, their differences with Qatar became larger and they besieged Qatar, and Iran saved Qatar. I sometimes wonder if Iran should have. Then the Qatar broke away from this coalition, and then so did Erdogan. Not because of any sympathy for the people of Yemen, but because of their differences with the Saudis and the Emiratis. In any case, they survived that genocidal war, and they've been besieged since. And even though no one supported them, they went to the aid of Gaza. They shut the Red Sea during the genocide in Gaza and continued to do so until the so-called ceasefire. Of course, it was a fake ceasefire, but all the countries in the region endorsed the ceasefire and endorsed Trump in Sharm el-Sheikh and Egypt in that circus that we saw a year and a half ago, I suppose. But in any case, Yemen has been besieged since, and flights from Iran have been banned and forbidden. But the Iranians, they sent a plane to Yemen. The Saudis tried to intimidate the pilots and to prevent the plane from landing, as they once did before many years ago. They bombed the airport so that the Iranian plane would not be able to land. But this time around, they failed and the Iranian plane landed. So this was an important event for Yemen, for Iran, for the region, and I think it's symbolic for things to come.
Yeah. And we have the funeral of Supreme Leader of Iran, the former Supreme Leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, and more than 100 countries participated so far. And yesterday it was reported that the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio issued a classified directive on June 26 to all U.S. embassies worldwide, pressuring countries against attending Supreme Leader of Iran's funeral. So far, with what we've seen, the regional countries, we had Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, we had Russia, China, other countries, but Europeans are absent. We haven't seen any Europeans. We haven't seen Americans, North America and South America. I don't know how many countries from these, because it seems that there is a tremendous pressure from the United States on countries. I don't know if Japan was there or South Korea. What is your understanding of this new report of the United States? I don't know why is that. This is a funeral, and they're so afraid of countries participating in a funeral. Your understanding, your take on that?
Yes, Americans have been threatening countries not to participate, and some countries, of course, out of fear, do not participate in Latin America and in Africa. Some regional countries, of course, are U.S. proxies as well, and they don't participate. The Europeans and Australia and New Zealand, of course, we don't expect them to participate, and I personally don't want them to participate. I don't think anyone wants to see any of these people. They're not worth our time, and their presence would only aggravate the public. But because after all, they were part of the war. I mean, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, they too were part of this war. But in any case, for the Iranians want to prevent the region from breaking apart and from collapsing, because that's what the Israeli regime does, or that's what it wants. So the Iranians want to improve relations with the Saudis, and with other countries in the region that participated in this criminal war, for the sake of the region and for the sake of stability and for the sake of stability in the Persian Gulf and West Asia in general, and in order to weaken the U.S. foothold in the region and to weaken the Israeli regime. But it doesn't. No one in Iran cares if the Europeans are not here. They are, during the 12-day war. We all remember that the Chancellor of Germany said that the Israeli regime does their dirty work for them, and the Prime Minister of Australia, said no one is mourning for what happened, the illegal onslaught in Iran and the murder of Ayatollah Khamenei, along with his family, his granddaughter, one-year-old child. So I don't think anyone cares that they're present, whether they're present or not. But there was a significant presence here from important countries, BRICS countries, regional countries, Central Asian countries, and the Caucasus. And of course, the most important thing is the huge crowds that have been attending. I haven't gone yet, but since midnight, before midnight last night, people were gathering at the place where Ayatollah Khamenei was to be taken this morning at 6 a.m. By the time he was there, at least tens or hundreds of thousands of people were there, and all day people have been going. It's very hot in Tehran, as you know. In summer, it's like 39, 40 degrees, and it's difficult to get there because they've closed off all the areas around that the complex for security reasons. Foreign leaders are going to be there, of course, and there's fear that the Kurdish terrorists in northern Iraq want to carry out an operation, or the ISIS and Al Qaeda sort, the Wahhabi Salafi Takfiris that the West trains and supports in Pakistan, in the no man's land in Pakistan, that these groups would carry out terrorist attacks. We've seen them try to infiltrate into the country, and they've also killed a number of soldiers near the Pakistani border, the Iraqi border, northern Iraq. So there's a lot of security, but there are huge crowds. And as you can see on live television, if anyone watches, I guess, Press TV or Al Mayadeen, the Arabic channel, or other or Iranian channels, they can see how extraordinary the crowds are. And people come and go. Like some go at midnight, some go at early in the morning, some go in the late morning, some in early afternoon. I'll probably go there at 4:30, 5:30 or so.
There were some reports about the vice president of the United States somehow informing Erdogan about during the war about the Kurdish terrorists coming into Iran, and then we had Erdogan interfering, calling. When it comes to it's unbelievable, this story out there, because they're trying to say that J.D. Vance tried to, inform the president of Turkey in order to avoid any sort of attack on Iran from these Kurdish terrorists, which they received a lot of weapons from the United States, as Donald Trump himself said before. And they were equipped, or it said Israel wanted that, and the whole situation went against Israel. And Israel is not. Jerusalem Post, by the way, reported that. It said Israel is not happy with what J.D. Vance did. When it comes to the Kurdish terrorists, these groups in Iraqi Kurdistan, how much of concern is that for Iran? And I remember since the war started, multiple times attacked them, destroyed, their sort of facilities, their forces. Is that a significant sort of threat to Iranians? Because how many forces do they have?
No, the United States did not inform the Iranians about anything. That's just fabricated news. The Iranians themselves have deeply infiltrated these groups, and they target them regularly. The government in northern Iraq, the local Kurdish government, they are U.S. proxy. It's a U.S. proxy, and they're allied with the Israeli regime. So they will do nothing to stop these groups. Sometimes they try, or they make some slight move under pressure from Iran, but they tolerate them, and they allow them to have bases across northern Iraq. And since the war began, Iran is repeatedly bombing them. But no, J.D. Vance had no role to play. The United States has no role to play in stopping any attacks. In fact, another fake piece of news that the Americans are putting out through the Washington Post and the New York Times is the claim that the Iranians were told by the Americans that the Israelis wanted down the plane that I was in, that they want to assassinate the negotiators when they were in Islamabad. That's another myth. There was no message from the United States to Iran. The Iranians, when they were in Islamabad, when we were in Islamabad, in fact, the Washington Post ran an article, an opinion piece, saying that the negotiators should be assassinated, they should be murdered. And then when the talks collapsed, the feeling was that there was a possibility that the Americans or the Israelis made down the plane. Remember, Trump has threatened to murder Iranian negotiators multiple times, just recently and during the recent negotiations. And he's threatened to obliterate Iran and to take it back to the Stone Age and to wipe out our civilization. And being the monster that he is, that's what he would say. But Vance is no different. So the Iranians, the delegation, the Iranian security in Iran decided that they would change the plane and that they would fly to Mashhad, which is close to the Afghanistan and Turkmenistan border, and then we would come by land to Tehran. And that's what we did. Because remember, Israeli planes cannot bomb Iran easily at all. It's American jets that refuel these planes. It's American planes that refuel these jets that allow them to come to Iran. And going all the way to Mashhad is virtually impossible for the Israeli regime. Any strikes during the 12-day war and during this recent war, that's not over. The Israelis all their jets were being refueled by the Americans. Otherwise, they have no ability to carry out a war against Iran. And if they start a war against Iran, Iran will flatten them, and there's not much that they can do without U.S. full support. So that's nonsense. I mean, the Americans did not inform anyone about attacks from Iraqi Kurdistan. The Americans encouraged those attacks. And the same is true from these Takfiris in Baluchistan, in Pakistan, where they launch attacks. These are all done with financial support, with military support, with political cover from Western governments, and of course the U.S. and the Israelis in particular. So So no, the Americans are waging all-out war against Iran. The riots that you recall in Tehran a few months ago, where they said that Iran murdered hundreds of thousands of people or tens of thousands of people and all that sort of nonsense. Those weapons were provided to the rioters who were trying to stage a coup or a military insurrection, yet they failed. All of these were carried out under the support, with full support from the Americans and the Israelis on many occasions, British intelligence, and sometimes with French intelligence participating as well.
Yeah. When it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, yesterday we've learned something like 33 ships or vessels passed through the Strait of Hormuz. Today, something like that. But there is a new statement, a joint statement by France and the United Kingdom, which was condemned by the Deputy Foreign Minister Qarib Abadi, and he condemned what these two countries are trying to do with some sort of cooperation. I don't know what is understanding of Iranians of these two countries coming to Oman and making new connection with Oman and trying to get closer to Oman, and how effectively can they change the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. Is that of concern for Iranian?
Well, if Oman wants to have good relations with Iran, then it will refrain from doing anything against Iran. They've done that during the war. They've refrained from participating in the war, like Kuwait and the Emirates and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Bahrain. And they've benefited from this. And I doubt that they will be persuaded by two unimportant countries like the British and the French, who don't have a military and who have their hands full with their dirty war in Ukraine. So I don't think that Oman will do anything foolish in this regard, because Iran won't tolerate it, no doubt. And the French and the British are not a force to be that Iran takes seriously. So again, the deputy foreign minister said what needed to be said, but if they really move in the wrong direction, then that would mean that Iran would have to deal with it in a different way.
Yeah. What is the understanding on the part of Iranians when it comes to the moves or the way that the United States, it seems that Iran is reporting, some reports in Iran say that the United States is sending weapons to the region. What is that? Is there any sort of evidence that the United States is trying to send more weapons, forces to the region and to try to do something, or maybe before midterm election in the United States?
It's not impossible. The Americans, after the ceasefire, they sent lots of equipment to the region, and a lot of that equipment was for land operations, and they brought in troops for land operations, which could be carried out through Kuwait or through the Emirates or from Bahrain, because that's where they've stationed a lot of these troops that are for land operations. But of course, they have their planes and their jets and everything else spread out across the region and in Jordan as well. But the troops for land operations are mostly, from my understanding, at least that's how it was a while back, in these three countries. But the Iranians are prepared for that. Ever since the ceasefire, the end of the 39 days war, the Iranians have been preparing themselves. They've been rebuilding whatever was damaged. And since the MOU, I mean, some people talk about the MOU being a bad deal, and I don't want to get into that debate. We discussed this before. There's good. I think it's on. I mean, there are good things about it. There's some shortcomings in it, no doubt. But no one in Iran from the beginning thought that the Americans were going to adhere to the MOU. No one was that naive. At least no one in power. But the Iranians wanted to export oil, and they had accumulated a lot of oil in the Persian Gulf that couldn't leave. A lot of tankers, they couldn't leave because of the U.S. siege. So the MOU allowed Iran to send very large quantities of oil very swiftly to its Asian markets. And that was necessary because you have a population of over 90 million people. And with the Afghan refugees, it's probably 95, 96, 97 million people. So the Iranians used that as to normalize the economy a bit, because the economy has been badly hit by the war and it's been under sanctions for decades. And also, Iran has been preparing, building new missiles, new drones, expanding the underground bases. They command and control centers, underground command and control centers. They've been replacing many thousands of decoys that were destroyed with new decoys. One of the things that really caused the Americans problems was the fact that Iran's key assets were deep underground, and they kept bombing them with B-52 bombers to no avail. Another was all those decoys. They kept bombing decoys, destroying decoys, and wasting billions of dollars of money on decoys that were some made in Iran, mostly made in China, from my understanding. And but also rebuilding stocks, because Iran had its supply of grain and wheat and other rice. Iran always keeps a very large supply of all of these things, as you know. And during the war, because of the siege, the Americans prevented this from getting into the country. So the Iranians, the ships that were waiting, they came in, and Iran has been able to purchase more supplies. So Iran has been preparing itself for another war, basically. And it could happen before the midterm elections. It could happen after the midterm elections. But personally, I think it would be an even greater mistake for the United States than the current war, because Iran knows that it will win. It is confident about itself. It has learned about U.S. capabilities. Remember, Iran won the 12-day war, but Iran performed much better in this war because of all that it had learned from the 12-day war. So now the Iranians are even further prepared, and the United States is not in a strong position to fight a war. So it's possible that the Americans would attack, but the Iranians are quite prepared to deal with them.
It seems the biggest issue for the United States right now is the Strait of Hormuz. Isn't that amazing that nobody's talking about the Iranian nuclear program? And it's all about the Strait of Hormuz. And yesterday we've learned that Donald Trump has suggested, or the Trump administration has suggested Iran not to have the fee system, the fee mechanism in the Strait of Hormuz. Instead, they're going to get their frozen assets back. And was there any sort of negotiations, or it was fake? What do we know about that? And what is the Iranian position on this Strait of Hormuz and new mechanism of that?
Nima, the Americans are always lying. I mean, just like the claim that they informed the Iranians about an assassination or an attempt to assassinate the negotiators, that was a lie. Remember, Trump just a couple of days ago, he said that the Iranians have requested a meeting 3-4 days ago in Doha, and I agreed. The Iranians did not request anything, and there was no plan to have a meeting. And the Americans sent Witkoff and Kushner, and no one from Iran attended. The following day, there were low-ranking officials in a deputy foreign minister leading a delegation that was planned beforehand to negotiate with Qatar and Pakistan, the mediators, about Lebanon, about Iranian stolen assets, and that was it. So anything that comes from Washington, you should take with like a ton of salt. And this is one of them. The Iranians, of course, are not going to accept relinquishing their control over the Strait of Hormuz. That is permanent. And it's not just fees. The Iranians will control the strait to make sure that its enemies do not use the strait to turn the Persian Gulf region into another war zone again. So no, that's out of the question.
Yeah, it means that no destroyer, no military ship going to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Is that the message from the Iranians? Basically, they're going to control the strait because of the security reasons.
It will be for security reasons, but also there will be a financial aspect to it. There's no doubt about that. They will collect fees. And if Oman does not want to be a part of it, the Iranians have told the Omanis, that's fine. We'll control the strait ourselves, and we will take the fees. If you don't want to be a part of it, you don't have to be a part of it. But Oman being a part of it or not being a part of it is not going to change anything. Iran will control the strait.
Yeah. Yesterday, we had the head of Iranian parliament responding to Donald Trump. And Donald Trump argued, as you know, that Iran is supposed to use money to buy food for their people because right now their people are very hungry and they're buying it and exclusively from the United States, corn, soybeans, and all of this and that. And then we had the response from the head of Iranian parliament. And he says, imagine having 40 something million of your